Once again, thank you all for joining. I might go back to the other tab just to make sure that you're listening me fine and you can follow the presentation along. And please make sure to drop your questions on the chat, and I'll make sure to spend the last 5 minutes of today's session answering the questions. But of course, you can all reach out to me personally after the today on the entire event, and we can chat and discuss all of the cool stuff. So if you're all here, I guess you're kind of like interested in startups, whether you're a founder yourself, whether you've worked at a startup, whether you're considering starting a company, or whether you're considering recruiting for a startup. You guys want to know what is it like to work at a startup? You just want to share experiences, hear my story. Of course, every story working at startups is extremely personal. But I think that my experience working in Latin America for multiple startups gave me a good amount of stories to tell, and I built my own idea of what it's like to work at startups. And today I'm going to be unpacking some of the myths that I believe that are being said constantly out there in the media, or friends or colleagues or other entrepreneurs. Some statements that people just put out there and they say this is what a startup is all about. And I'm gonna challenge those statements. If you got myths that you also want to challenge, please also drop them in the chat. What are some of the great truths that people say that relate to building a company or starting a company or working at a startup? I would love to hear those as well. I'm just going to talk about 5 of them. So I hope you enjoy it. And I'm going to be talking about my personal experience. So everything that I say, it's out of my journey, and it's not clearly a definitive source of truth. But I hope you find it interesting, and you like my journey. So let's get started. I'm just going to go back for a second because I just want to make sure that everything is looking great and you guys are looking at the presentation and you can hear me well. I'm just going to go back for a second. Yay, a lot of thumbs up. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. So going back, so a little bit about me. I'm from Uruguay. If we got people from Uruguay in the audience, please, please, please react or leave a comment. I would love to connect with you all. But amazing to have a lot of people joining from all over the world, but also proud Latinas and Latinos in the audience. I'm from Uruguay. I grew up and spent all my life there. I did my undergrad in Uruguay. I studied advertising, so did communication studies and specialized in advertising, which was a very interesting moment of my life when I made that decision. And then I moved to New York, to the US 2 years ago to pursue my MBA at NYU Stern. The reason why I decided to do an MBA, and we can talk more about that if someone is interested, was basically I wanted to continue studying. I wanted to broaden my horizons. I wanted to access an industry, or let's say companies that I couldn't access from Uruguay. And I wanted to have that experience of living in New York. So that's basically what brought me to New York to pursue my MBA. I spent over 6 years building a different early stage tech startups in Latin America. I've always joined early stage. That's something that I was prioritizing at that time because it allowed me to develop a broad range of skills that I was looking to develop. And also I could wear many hats. I could work closely with founders, and I will share a little bit more about my opinion of working at early stage technology companies. And there's of course a nuances that come for the fact that I was working out in Latin America, and we know that we got our own things going on over there. What I was doing with those startups was mainly leading the business development and the marketing teams. So in terms of industries, I was a little bit all over the place. The first company I joined was an influencer marketing company. I joined when it was just the two co-founders, and I became a partner at the company 3 months after I joined, which was amazing because I could really get the sense of how it felt to be running the company with skin in the game. And at that point, I joined as an operations manager, but I was basically doing everything from biz dev to marketing to making sure that our online marketplace connecting brands with content creators was working in the best way possible. After 2.5 years working at Spotlight and building an amazing company, I transitioned into another startup, which was an education technology company. I was looking for something that was going to feel a little bit more impactful with the things that I cared about at that time. So I joined this education company. It was a very interesting moment because it was when COVID hit Uruguay, and the company was at that point transitioning into a digital model. So I had to learn a lot, and I had to put on my soldier boots and do a lot of stuff that wasn't in my job description, but That's basically what startups life is all about. So that was also another startup that I worked for. And then before coming to the US, I was working at a CX automation, so customer experience automation company that was also providing Salesforce development and consulting services for US customers. And I was, again, leading both biz dev and marketing teams. Um, After that, and while I was doing my MBA at NYU Stern, I had the opportunity to work at Google. I was working in strategy and operations for their top priority partners program. Amazing experience. That was my first time leaving the startup world behind and joining a big company. Very different. And I'm going to speak a little bit to that, but it was an amazing time working at one of the best companies and the largest companies in the world. And basically, I was working on internal strategies and making decisions for where Google should be doubling down their investments for industry or for each region or for each of their products. And finally, nowadays, I'm currently working at Kaltura. It's a video technology company based out in New York, global company, public company as well. So again, going into big tech, not as big as Google, but not as small as the startup that I was used to work at in Latin America. And I'm building strategic partnerships, which is basically kind of like a sales role where I'm like trying to secure deals with some of the companies that we consider strategic based on the industry they are working on and based on the vision that we have for the company. So really excited for my role right now. And if you're interested into the video sector, I would love to discuss more about that. I'm gonna go back to it. I'm sorry that I'm doing this, but I just want to make sure that you guys are following. Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, and please keep on leaving comments and questions on the chat. So we're gonna discuss startups today, and I would just want to make sure that we're all on the same page when I talk about startups. What do I mean? So first of all, for me, when I talk about startups, I talk about a temporal state. Uh, you can have a large company operating under a startup culture or with certain things that it makes it look like if it's still a startup. But honestly, for me, when we're talking about startups, we're talking about a temporal state, which is the moment when a company is conceived and it's in this stage of rapid growth and trying to go beyond that product market fit to make an established position in the market and making sure that they got a product and service that is needed or that it's attractive to a certain market, right? So it's a temporal state. It's not forever, but we do have large companies operating under a more startup culture or type of vision that they wanna implement, right? Life at startups also, we gotta understand it's about a constant search from product market fit. I don't know, guys, if you're extremely familiar with the concept, but if you are and you want to share with the people in the chat, you can also share your own definition. But basically, this is one of the most discussed terms that we're going to hear in the startup world, which is making sure that we got a product or a service that is being addressed to a specific market. And there's a fit because there's a need that our product or service is addressing, right? And it's a constant search because it's not just finding it and just like making sure that we are selling it, but we're constantly trying to understand how our product or how our service is fitting a specific market. And that requires understanding not just of how we should develop a product, but also what are the needs out there in the market and finding that specific market. Another trait or another important element when we're discussing the definition of startups is that they are designed for rapid growth. And this is, I would say this is like the main nuance that we can make when we're discussing other types of businesses. My parents, they both started they both started different companies. My dad started a real estate agency back in Uruguay. My mom, she has a cookware and tableware store. Can we call them startups? I would say, according to this definition, not really. And it's not because they are not in tech, because there are tech components to their businesses, right? But it's because the way that they created these businesses was not designed for rapid growth. Startups are designed, or by definition, founders that start these types of companies are looking for rapid growth and they want to get there as soon as possible to get certain returns, and it will depend on what they're looking for, right? And we're going to discuss a little bit more about that. And the fourth thing, and I would say this is not just for startups, but mainly for different businesses, that for people that want to start a business or a company, we're talking about a scalable business model. If we find our market, but it's not big enough, people that are creating startups are constantly thinking, how can I make this a more scalable thing? How can I reach other segments? How can I reach different geographies? How can I reach different markets? And how can I build a business that is supposed to support all of that? So when we're talking about startups again, and when we're talking about product market fit, we're thinking about three main things. We're thinking about desirability. That is for you to guys think, am I building something that is going to be desired by someone? We're thinking about viability. Can I build out a business model that is going to support what I'm building for these people that want what I'm selling? Basically, can I make money out of this? Is this viable? And the third one is feasible. Is this the feasibility aspect? Can I technically build this? Can I technically deliver this? Can I actually make this happen? So these are the three buckets that you have to think of when you're building a startup. Sounds good? Please leave your comments and I'll make sure to review them as we move forward. So let's start with the myths. The five biggest myths that I want to unpack. First one, and it's one of the most important to me, is go big or go home. Go home. A lot of people that are in the startup ecosystem, or even those that are not in the startup ecosystem, that are just working in media, or people that are working around you, will tell you that if you're building a startup, you have to be thinking about a $1 billion company, and that's simply not true, or at least not in my definition. When we're building a startup, you can build a startup that is going to be like more like a lifestyle business, what we call, which is basically considering what's the type of lifestyle that you want to have and building a business that will support your lifestyle. And that's not necessarily have to be a $1 billion company or like even like a $50 million company. It could be a $10 million company, it would be a $5 million company, and it's still considered a startup and you can still be considered successful. So when we're talking about success, I I want to always restate to everyone that I'm talking about startups about it's all about defining it in your own terms. You really have to think when you're working at a startup, when you're building a company, or if you're thinking about starting a new company, you have to think about what does success mean to you. And this is something that I had to learn early on when I was joining all these startups because I had all these founders discuss their visions and how much money they wanted to make or how big their ambition was. But it was more about them being driven by external investors or the market or just like a news report than their own definition of success. So startups are not all everything about going big or going home. You can actually build something that is relatively big. Big is different for different people. So make sure that you're defining success in your own terms if you're going into the startup world and don't feel that you have to hit a home run or if it's a complete failure. On that note, and I'm going to leave a lot of nuggets or quotes that are not mine or might be mine, and I'm just like modifying them a little bit. You can define your failure based on each other on other people's successes, right? So just the fact that there's a startup that raised more money than you, just the fact that there's a startup that is growing faster or has more people, that doesn't mean that you're not doing great. That doesn't mean that you're not doing great. You have to define the success in your own terms and make sure that you stay in your lane and you're thinking about what you want to build and what are your ambitions and what are your success metrics. Sounds good? And please, if you disagree, feel free to chip in on the chat. Okay, let's jump into the second myth. Don't share your idea. So you're thinking about starting a company and you're brainstorming with a friend or you're working at home on just like thinking about what's the next thing that you can build or the one thing that you want to build, or actually you're about to join a company, but you are not sure if you can tell other people about it. So I think that's a really bad advice, the fact that we can't share our ideas. The only way that ideas progress and grow is by sharing and talking about them with other people. So three main things that you should be doing if you're considering starting a company and you got an idea: ask other people what they think. Make sure you're asking the right people. You can ask a lot of people, and many of them will just give you like crappy advice, and it's fine. But you have to take it with a grain of salt. But you just make sure that you're asking people for their thoughts. Listen to them. Listen to their responses. Listen to their advice. Always make sure that you're not just building on your own and not taking advice from other people. So ask the right questions, listen to other people, listen to potential customers. When you're going to talk to other people, it's not just speaking to successful entrepreneurs or to colleagues or to friends that you think that you like their advice on what if the idea makes sense or not, if the idea is might be desirable or feasible or viable. Make sure that you're talking to your prospective customers already. Who do you know that is working on that space or who is buying stuff in that space that you can go tell them and just like ping pong your idea. So share your idea, as a way of making sure it's progressing and it's growing. Third myth is it's not just about coding. Well, this is already, I'm already giving it away, right? The myth would be it's all about coding. So you're thinking about starting a company or you want to work at a startup and everybody's asking you, do you know how to code? And the reason why people ask that question is mainly because when we talk about startups, people, the first thing that pops into their mind is, oh, you're going to build a highly technical company. But the fact that I think people are getting wrong is that they're forgetting about the fact that you're building a business, right? It's not just about building technology, it's about building a business. So when people ask, do you know how to code? My response is, uh, should I also know how to sell, communicate, recruit, design, fundraise, and all of the different activities that someone has to do when they are building a company, right? So you don't have to be an expert in all of these things, and you don't have to be a technical founder to start a company or a tech company. You can have a co-founder actually. You can have another company work with you in the first initial steps. So this is another thing, but like I think you should always try to have the technology developed in-house. Uh, but this is not a reason for you to stop thinking about starting a company. The fact that you don't know how to code, because the main reason or the main thing that you have to be thinking about is that you're building an idea that it has to be supported by the fact that there's people out there that might need what you're building and that they would be willing to pay for that, and you can actually deliver it. Then the technical aspect or the technological aspect to it is just the vehicle that you're going to use to make it happen, right? And for that, there's multiple ways, there are multiple things that you can do. And think about what's your superpower. What are you really good at? Is it that you're a great salesperson? Is it that you're a great designer and you have to really leverage those skills? Is it that you are the best one to make sure that you can raise money or recruit people and get them on board into your idea, into your team? So it's not all about coding, and don't feel that you can start your own company or that you can join a startup just because you don't know how to code. It's much more than that. And if you're building a company, if you're building your team, your early stage team, and as I already said, I worked in different early stage startups. It's not about hiring all superstars. You're going to hire a lot of people, hopefully, if you're successful during your time at a startup or building a company. And you're going to have people that are really good for a certain period, for a certain stage of the company. And that's completely fine. You don't need the superstars. You need the people that were going to be consistent, that are going to be committed, they're also going to be talented in their own way, and that they're going to fit into your culture and they're going to follow the code of conduct that you want to implement, but also they're going to challenge you. So that's like the 5 C's that Ray Dalio explains when he's talking about recruiting. So make sure you're looking for those things, those aspects, those personality things, and not just the superstars that know how to code. Of course, at one point you'll need coders. So how are we doing so far? I'm just going to jump back into the other tab where I can see all the comments and make sure uh, we're not getting any questions that I'm not addressing. Okay, we're doing good. So far, so good. Thank you for all the good love and the comments. Let's move on to the fourth myth. So another thing that I hear and I advise and consult for startups a lot is the market doesn't get it, right? Or even if you're working at a company, you're working on products, you're working in sales, um, and you're working at the startup, right? And you're like, man, why are we doing so good? Why are we doing as good as we would like to be doing right now? And someone might say, well, the market doesn't understand what we're building, or our customers don't know how to use the product. And that's something that I hear a lot. And my response is like, really? Do you think that we're not being successful because the market doesn't understand what we are trying to sell? So there's multiple things that could be happening. So you have to rethink your message, right? Are we communicating the right way? And for product people that we might have in the audience, how are you translating the customer needs into solutions that you're bringing into market with features or capabilities, right? We always hear we shouldn't be selling features, we should be selling solutions, but we shouldn't be just selling solutions. We should be selling solutions and communicating them in a way that it's the customer's own terms, right? So we might not be communicating in the right terms. The pain that we're trying to solve might not be real, or might not be big enough, or the market might be too small. So you have to be constantly challenging yourself. And when you're embarking in the journey of starting a company or working at a startup, you can't just be so focused on your product or your service that you forget that you have to be serving a specific need. And you can't just say the market doesn't understand my product and my service. And if you hear your founder or the founder of your company say the market is not responding well to what we're building and it's their fault, you have to really question that founder and bring those tough questions to the table and say like, is it really that the thing, or is it that we should be changing something, right? And then it's the matter of starting to pivot, and we'll hear that word a lot in the startup, right? We should pivot into doing something else, a different product, a different messaging, different type of marketing. But those are all of the types of things that you should be doing if you're building, because your response can your answer to the reason why you're not being as successful as you would like can't be the market doesn't get it, right? So that's the fourth myth. And finally, the fifth myth that I want to discuss with you guys is the entrepreneur's traits. So if you're a founder, I want you to drop a note in the chat. If you've considered starting a company, or if that's something that you would like in your future, please also drop a note on the chat. And I would love to hear from you. Do you feel that you have entrepreneur's traits? And I say it's a myth because I don't think this is something that actually exists, right? I think that entrepreneurs are not the genius people that we are being constantly bombarded with on the news. These, people that grew up with specific personality traits that are very unique to themselves, and you either get them or don't get them. I think the entrepreneurial traits or the personality things that we all always discuss about people starting companies are things that we can actually learn. Being a great salesperson, being empathetic, understanding a market, learning how to code, being good with people. Those are all things that we can learn. Being having grit to endure through challenging times. This is not something that you are born with, and at least that's my opinion. So when people talk about what are the common traits among the entrepreneurs, and people will say, well, you know, you're hardworking, or they never give up, they have like a specific vision. I would say, yeah, but those are all things that I've seen people develop. So I don't think there's a specific blueprint that we can just attribute to entrepreneurs. I think we can all start companies as long as we're thinking about what is success for those companies in our own terms. And I think that those traits, those personality aspects can all be learned. And yes, there are certain things that come more natural to us, but that doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to get there at certain points. So I'm going to stop there before I jump right into the next slide, which is what I've learned, just to make sure if there's some discussion or questions going on in the chat. And I can't see the chat, so I'll just continue. And I know we got a couple more minutes, so I'm going to rush through the next couple slides and see if we got any questions on the chat. So what I've learned so far in my startup journey, it's much more about discovering. We shouldn't be looking specifically for inventing the next new thing. We should be looking for needs. We shouldn't be looking for ideas. My little brother, he's 25. He's very much into entrepreneurship and startups. And I always argue with him because he actually thinks that you can sit in your room and come up with an amazing idea for a company. And I think that might happen. Yeah, I'm not saying it won't happen, but I guess that the path that I would recommend is thinking about needs. And for that, you have to ask people, you have to talk to people, you have to get out there, you have to work, you have to build your experience, you have to join other startups to really understand how to think in terms of your customer needs and what you might identify as an opportunity for a business, right? So it's more about discovering and not just coming up and inventing something new, something revolutionary, because everything is just like a different way of doing something that already exists. Second point that I've learned, success is much more strategic than it seems. Being successful in startups, and we already discussed, it's about defining success in your own terms. It's not a matter of luck. It's not a matter of just right timing. You can be really strategic when you're starting a company to reduce the chances that you will fail and increase the chances that you will succeed. understanding your market, understanding the timing, understanding the resources that you need, understanding your skills and what you're lacking and what you have to bring from the outside. It's much more rational and strategic than irrational and just an emotional journey. So if you're thinking about starting a company or you're joining a startup, don't just get into the fog of the vision. Just make sure, run your analysis, be thorough, understand what the startup is building, understand what is out there or what you want to build, and be strategic about your decision. It's about a return on your investment. Your investment could be your time, it could be your money, it could be also the fact that you are saying no to another opportunity. So think about those things and make a strategic decision. Third aspect, I've learned about this, consider the power of yes. It's very different from a no. Customers will say not yet. Your boss will tell you not yet. A founder might tell you, an investor will tell you not yet. And that's not a no. You're going to get a lot of no's. And that's completely fine. I got a lot of no's. I still get a lot of no's as I'm working as a salesperson, right? But you have to understand that there's a big power when someone drops the concept or the notion of yet. This means that there's an open window for me to jump back right in at another point in the near future. Fourth point, you have to make your customers aware that you exist before you can sell them anything. So it's not just about talking about branding, but it's also talking about like educating. You have to educate your customers when you're building a product and when you're trying to sell something that is new, because they won't just go into your door and scream, I want your product or your service. You have to make them aware of what you're selling, and that requires a lot of different strategies and tactics. And the last piece, which is really, really, really important, if you're joining a startup, if you're starting a company, if you're investing, there's always going to be a conflict of interest between founders, investors, and employees. And that's pure reality. The founders want to recruit people to join their startup, and they want to get the best talent at the expense of the resources that they got, right? And for them, it's all a matter of, success in their own terms and making the biggest return on their investment, on their investors' investment. For investors, they're looking at how much money did I put and what's the expected return that I want to get from this. It's different from what the founder wants. Maybe the founder wants to get out early. They want to do like an exit, but the investor is looking for a different type of return. There's going to be conflict of interest. And for the employees, you might be there to learn. You might be there to get some stock options, but it's going to be a different path for you than for the founders and for the investors. So if you make peace with the fact that there's conflict of interest and you're sure of what you want to achieve with your goals, I think it's going to make your life much easier. And finally, before we conclude, because I know we're kind of like running out of time, differences between startups and big tech, because I'm working in big tech, rapid growth versus, larger scale. You can have larger impact working at a big tech because of more resources. As startups, you have to be really resourceful. In big tech, there's added complexity. For sure, there's more processes. In startups, you're fully owning a specific process or a specific unit. In big tech, there's a bigger structure that will help you succeed at a different type of level. Amazing experiences at both. You have to really think about all these things when you're making that decision. And being a generalist, I don't have the time to go through this, and I'm probably getting kicked out of my own session. But we can discuss more about this if you got the time, if you want to reach out. But I'm basically a generalist. So if you consider yourself a generalist, make sure to put yourself out there and keep on learning as much as you can, because that's the way that I encourage people to learn and build their own journey and their own professional experience. This is my personal contact info. I'm also going to drop it in the chat. Make sure to reach out. I would love to hear from all of you in the near future. And there's another session. There's another session coming up, but I don't see that I got kicked out. So I guess I can stay for a couple more minutes. If you guys have more questions, I'm happy to answer. My contact info again. I'm just going to drop it on the chat. And please make sure to add me on LinkedIn or on other social media. Happy to connect with you all. Thanks so much for joining me for this session. I hope you find it useful. I hope you got inspired, and I look forward to connecting with all of you. So have a great rest of the event, and make sure to connect in the near future. Goodbye, everyone.